There is a massive amount of dollars, euros, rupiah flowing through the aviation world. And when you make decisions, you need to understand the financial impact of it. Boeing and Airbus, their 20-year outlook always tells you how many thousands of airplanes are coming. And then in the next sentence, they tell you how there's not enough pilots to fly them. Because we've done such a good job in the automation of cockpits, pilots are now becoming more systems administrators, systems operators. When I became the director of tech services at WestJet, the first thing I did is I signed up to the University of Calgary and did a financial for non-financial managers and accounting for non-financial accounting, non-accountants.
Hi everyone, welcome to the second season of my podcast Flightpath with Alok. Today I have a very special guest who has flown in all the way from Miami, USA to join us here, Mr. Rob Taylor from Carlyle Aviation. Please join me in welcoming him to the podcast. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Alok.
I've been trying to get you in the show for close to 2 years.
Yes.
So I feel this is a success today. I finally got you here. And for all the good reasons, you're here in Bangalore today in person. And it's absolutely my pleasure to be able to host you on my podcast. And I can tell you a lot of my audience, people who listen to it, will be keenly looking forward to this episode in particular. Yeah.
First of all, Alok, thank you very much indeed. As I say, 2 years we've been talking about how we get me here or how we get me online. So it's an absolute pleasure to be in Bangalore here in the studio with you. I hope I don't disappoint them, but we'll see. We'll see where we are an hour from now.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get right into it. Maybe we let us start with you. As a professional in the industry, if I may request you to just give us a little bit of your career trajectory, your early years, and what got you where you are today.
What got me into aviation? I've been lucky enough to listen to most of your podcasts, and the ones that really intrigue me are obviously my fellow CTOs in the industry, Aidan and those guys. So mine's is completely different from theirs. How I got into aviation. Growing up in Scotland, our education system, in your high school, you focused on core subjects. Mathematics, arithmetic, English, geography, history, stuff like that. And I was actually wanting to go off to be an architect. Direct correlation to aviation. But when I was in this finishing second year of high school is when we had to start picking our core subjects for our careers. So I had to drop some of the subjects that I liked and pick up subjects that I'd never done before. And I was doing a career day at Glasgow University, which is where I was hoping to go. And I got told that half of the subjects I had were wrong. I had to go back and maybe go to 5th year, 6th-year studies before they'd even get into university. My parents were going through a very bad divorce at the time, not the best time in our family's life. And I said, bugger it. And my cousin, I'd gone to him with the army recruiters the year before. And I thought, well, I'm going to go with this. So I went off to join the army. 16 years old, here I am. I'm leaving school, leaving home. I'm off to the military. And because I was still at high school at the time when I applied, the recruiting office said, no, you have to get your headmaster's report and your mom's permission.
Which year are we talking about?
1981. So then I went off, got the headmaster's report. I got a call back into the recruiting officer who looked at me and went, Mr. Taylor, we don't want you in the army. And I went, what? It says, your headmaster's report's too good. You should be going to university or you should be doing something else. You're not joining the army. We don't want you. The kind of person you are means that you're going to think, and not always do we want people to think in a battlefield. So I said, well, I'm going to join the Marines. And he went, whoa, hold on a minute. We're not losing you to the Marines. So that's Navy versus Army. So the next thing you know, I'm in the military, and the first thing they do is send me to college. All the things I said I'm not going to do. So I picked aviation in the Army. I had a fantastic training. I was in probably we call them God's Corps, which is the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, and we're the people that look after all of the equipment that the British military have. That's literally how I got into aviation. Is my mum and dad were divorcing. I had enough of school, and they sent me to college. From that, I left the military after 7 years, 1988. Married an amazing Canadian girl. We're still married now, 37 years later, still together, and emigrated to Canada. And when I was getting out, I applied, as you do, most military guys, you apply for every job under the sun. And I applied at a company called Pacific West Airlines. And as I got accepted for an interview, they froze all the hiring because PWA was now going through a merger with Canadian Pacific. And so this is now 1988. And so the hiring got froze, and so I carried on, went into helicopters. I worked for a company called Associated Helicopters. First thing they did is send me to the most northern part of North America, a little place called Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories. And from there, I came back down, interview, went back again, and I went off to join this new company called Canadian Airlines. So that is now 1988, 1989, Canadian Airlines. I was with them until 1992. Then I went off to work for Pratt & Whitney in Canada, manufacturing engines. We call them the PT6 twin pack, brand new engine type that was being built, ended up becoming an APU in the 777. And I realized very quickly that manufacturing and me are just not made for each other. I'm not, as a field engineer working in the military, standing on a production line, putting bolt A into hole A and turning to the right just wasn't in my DNA. So I went back into consultant engineering as you did yourself.
Right.
And I did that for a while, then went back into the MRO. And I was working for a new company called Spire Aviation in Calgary, Alberta. And Spire Aviation was their attempt to go into commercial aviation. Most people have never heard of Spire. But if you look at the shuttle, the Canada arm that used to be on the shuttle, that was made by Spire out of in Canada. And that's why I always had the Canada flag and the Canada logo on it. So that commercial aviation, while I was there, some of the people I worked with at Canadian Airlines back in the late 80s and early 90s had started a brand new airline in Canada. They're Canada's first ever low-cost airline, and today their most successful airline launch ever in Canadian history, a little company called WestJet Airlines. So I joined WestJet Airlines in 1997. They had 3 airplanes in service, 2 in we call them in the barn, getting ready to be deployed, and I came on at that time in 97. Best time in my career. Typical startup airline, you wear many hats at the same time. And when I finally left, I was the director of tech services, purchasing, supply chain management, publications, and toilet paper or something like that. So basically all the spend outside of heavy maintenance and line maintenance came through my group. So that was an amazing learning period in my career. I was very lucky that I had 2 amazing mentors. A gentleman called Gareth Davies, who was employee number 7, all the way through to another gentleman called Richard Van Houten, who was a consultant that helped me in all the engine work that we did. So that 9-year period was probably the most formative time in my commercial aviation growth. From there, I left and went off to run a VIP operation in Western Canada. High net worth family. I won't say their name just in case, but I ran their VIP operation from their own VIP. They had a flight training school. They owned an FBO, and so my job was to bring them all together into one P&L. And after that, I was approached by a company called Apollo Aviation. My first interaction with Apollo Aviation is back in about 2003. When at WestJet we had our first NG order starting to come in. We had 100 order book, 20 firm. I think there was 60 options, and the rest were warrants. But in that period of time, we had 23 737-200s, various ages and hours and cycles. I think we had the highest hour airplane at one time and the highest cycle airplane at one time. And so part of being the tech services and purchasing, we also dispose of the assets. So I was very lucky to, again, Mr. Davies, who had retired at that point, he helped buy the airplanes so he can help me get rid of them. So between myself and Gareth, we got rid of all the 737-200s. Some went back to the lessors, Most of them, we owned, so we sold them. And that was probably my second time of working with one of your colleagues, Mr. Sean O'Connor, who runs your North American side of business. Yeah. So Sean was with GCAS back then, or Triton, I think it was. And I had one of the leased aircraft, and I used to have to do the maintenance reserve, reconciliation with Sean. And then when we were selling the aircraft, we had to deal with Sean as well as the airplane was going out. So here we go. Fast forward, we've now got rid of all the old airplanes. We've got all the new airplanes coming in. Basically at 40 something, I think I'd hit my ceiling. There was nowhere else to go after that. So it was time to move on into the VIP side of it. And, circling back, when I sold some of those 737-200s, it was to this brand new company called Apollo Aviation. I'd known one of their employees, a gentleman called Mark Brown, who was on my customer service manager at Aerothrust, where I did engine JTAD repairs. And then he helped me in some of the management with Richard. And so here we are, come full circle again. And so talking to him one day saying, working for billionaires is not going to be in my long-term career path. So I said, well, we have just sold 50% of the company. And part of that is we got to grow. Have you ever thought about coming down to Miami? And so here I am. I started with them in November of 2007, and I've been there, 16 and a half years now.
Right.
That's literally the accidental tourist type of thing. I never planned to be in aviation. I was want to be an architect, and it's the best thing I ever did. I'm glad I didn't become an architect, because I don't think me and architecture would probably get on real well. Aviation, I've been doing it now since I was 16 years old when I started my apprenticeship through the military. So you're 46 years in aviation.
Wow. It almost sounds like that it was destiny. You had to get into aviation, no matter how much you tried avoiding getting into college.
You know what? You and I know, I've talked many times, once it's in your blood, it's very hard to get out. I've known way too many people that left aviation,
come back,
and within 2-3 years they're back. They just miss what we have.
True. I agree, 100%. That I have a very interesting tidbit I want to touch upon. And I think this is something I'm picking up from conversations we have had in the past, and given all the work history and travels you mentioned. How many passports you have now?
Not quite like James Bond, but I just got my third passport.
You have 3 passports.
I've got 3 passports, yeah.
Wow.
I've got my original UK passport. I became a naturalized Canadian citizen, obviously married to a Canadian girl and living in Canada for 19 years. And now 16 years in America, I just became a naturalized US citizen in December.
Right.
So not quite James Bond, but I'm on
almost
my way.
There.
I'm on my way.
Yes.
If you see me with an Aston Martin, then you can ask questions.
As I said earlier, the most famous James Bond is still Scottish, I believe.
Still the Scottish guy.
All right. So let's just go deeper into what you have just explained about your career trajectory, in the sense of we have touched upon how you got into Carlyle. I think maybe on your role. See, the thing is not necessarily touching upon the business operating model, but the whole CTO piece. One of the things you mentioned is you have heard some of my episodes where some of your counterparts in the other companies have spoken about what they do, how they do things. Obviously, essentially, a CTO's role is a CTO's role, but I think every leasing company or every company has their own unique flavor and culture, and their own unique way of doing things. Maybe having heard those episodes and given your thoughts, maybe give us a little flavor of how you feel your role stands out or is different, rather, let us say, in comparison to what others are doing. Not necessarily drawing a comparison, but giving us a unique flavor.
I mean, the comparison is we represent a company on all technical matters. The old saying, the buck stops here. This is it. If things go wrong, it's me or my team or something that we do. We manage our processes. Something is not working. So the CTO is the person that can sit at the table with the financial people, the legal people that are making decisions on fleet acquisitions, fleet dispositions, single asset moves. We're the person that has to sit there and will take the technical viewpoint, but it's got to be balanced with the financial understanding of what you're trying to do. There is a massive amount of dollars, euros, rupiah flowing through the aviation world. And when you make decisions, you need to understand the financial impact of it. if you go back in your career, when I was working for airlines, there used to be two people that said, without us, there's no aviation. And that's really the two people that had the closest relationship on an airline, and that's pilots and mechanics. So the pilots, without us, there's no aviation. Mechanics, well, if you don't have me fixing your airplanes, there's no aviation.
They still do that.
Still do that. Having come into this side of it, without money, there's no aviation. Nothing happens unless you have a very significant amount of capital to help you do it. That's where the lessors come in. That's why a CTO sitting at that table needs to understand the financial impact of any decision. We take the technical understanding and then relay it as how finance and legal people can understand it so a decision can be made. I mean, the CTO is also the chief cheerleader. Your job is not just that, it's training. It's passing knowledge on. I mean, all of us, and I think Aidan and all the other guys will tell you the same. Our job now is to pass on to the next generation. This is it. I mean, this is me to the end of my career, whether it's 1 year or 5 years. This is it. I'm at the end now. I can see the end of the tunnel, and it's no longer a train. So how do we take that? How do you take a lifetime's knowledge and pass it on to someone else? And I know we're going to talk about training in a little bit, but that is a huge part of what we do now is we have to train the next group. I keep telling the guys, you have to think differently than where you are now as a director, as a vice president, because that thinking differently is going to stand you in good stead. But if you don't think differently when I'm gone and I'm the only one thinking that way, you have an issue.
Right. Training is interesting. I think maybe right time to get into it now.
Yeah.
Maybe give us your thoughts, Rob. How do you see that? Like what you have touched upon is that you see your role right now as doing, I would say, knowledge transfer. But I would say maybe we should add the word wisdom transfer as well. The wisdom is ingrained, but still, experience mixed with knowledge can be wisdom. So
correct.
How do you see that happening, or how do you plan to do that, or how you are doing it? Maybe tell us.
Okay, so how am I doing it? I'm going to go back a few steps to when I started at Apollo, which was the forerunner to Carlyle. In those days, the bulk of the work that we did was primarily straight to end of life aircraft. Sorry, not end of lease, end of life. And the people that we had in the company at that time were people who were very good at specialized taking the aircraft to the ground and helping with the disassembly and put the parts back into the supply chain. So the wisdom and knowledge that I gained there is now helping me with the new Carlyle, where we are in dealing with more of a mid. So Carlyle, when Carlyle acquired us in 2018, we've now grown to have 4 very unique funds. Ways of deploying capital. We have our PSP, which is PDP, which is our P-delivery payments. Then we have our CAF funds, which is our new and newer aircraft. So that's buying directly from. So PDP is pre-delivery payments. So that is a fund that we deploy to airlines that are looking to finance their deposits. When you make an order book with Boeing or Airbus or any of the large manufacturers, you have to come up with deposits almost immediately, a percentage at the signing of the contract, and then progress payments along the way. If you have an order book of even 50 airplanes with Boeing or Airbus, that's $1 billion. And if you have to come up with 10% at the beginning, that's $100 million immediately you have to put down, and then progress payments along the way. What we do with that fund is we will finance that deposit that allows the airline to keep their operating cash, because literally every day an aircraft takes off, it's fighting with its competition to stay alive. That allows the airline to then keep their operating capital and not have it tied up, because an order book with the manufacturers could be 3-4 years in advance. That's a lot of money to be tied up. So if you take 100 airplanes, that's even more tied up. So that pre-delivery payment financing allows airlines to do that. Our CAF fund, which is our Carlyle Aviation lease fund, that allows us to deal with aircraft that are new or newer. That targets airlines specifically to do sale leasebacks on the production line, or buying from them when they're looking to generate cash, and we can buy those airplanes that are in that 5, 6, 7 year sweet spot. SASOF is our Science Aviation Special Opportunities Fund. Science was the company that owned 50% of us back in 2007, and who Robert and Bill, the co-founders of the airline, purchased back their shares in about 2017. 2018, we got an unsolicited call from the Carlyle Group wanting to talk to us, which led to an LOI, letter of intent, to purchase us in the summer of 2018, and that got formalized in the December of 2018, and we became Carlyle Aviation partners. So that's where CAF comes from. Science was the company that owned 50% of Apollo back in those days. So SASOF is our Science Aviation Special Opportunities Fund. That fund deals with purely mid to end of life assets. And then we have one other fund, which is CASP, which is our Carlyle Aviation Securities. Those are the guys that will work on behalf of insurance companies or banks, and do stocks, bonds, ETCs, WECs, ETCs, which basically allows you to finance aircraft during their operation. So from a thesis standpoint, we can take you from deposits to end of life, and if you need financing during the term, we can help finance you through our CASP.
Wow.
So very unique. I don't know of any other company that's doing it like this. So, so to go back to how we started, come bringing back to the first question, which is transfer of knowledge. Back in 2007 to about 2017, we primarily dealt with older aircraft. So here we are now. We've gone from about 18 plus years, average life to average age, to 10.4, 10.5. So I tell people that our clock is indexing back the way we're getting younger as we deploy more capital. Right now we've got about 385 airplanes on the portfolio, about 12.2 billion assets under management. And so the knowledge transfer has got to be almost directly linked to the change in the portfolio. So the guys that helped me in the early days, who were mechanics that come up through the consultant ranks to help me move the airplanes, I'm now hiring engineers with double masters. I've now got people that have business degrees.
PhDs.
Absolutely,
I know one.
I mean, I've got a young guy in my team who deals with my technical management. He's got a master's in predictive analysis, and I think he was doing his PhD and gave up on it, or got tired or something. But so he's working on that side. So that knowledge transfer is a two-way street, even right to the end. I'm learning things from the younger guys that help me make better decisions. And I'm passing on the why, the where, and the how we did things in the past to help them understand that although you don't have 25 years in aviation, you've come in from a different avenue. Old guys like me will tell you why we did it. Your job is to take that and then roll it up into what you're going to be doing in 10 years when I'm not there. So maybe not the right answer about knowledge transfer, but it is vitally important as a two-way street, because our industry is changing. It changes all the time. And I need to learn as well.
Well, that's, I think, very kind of you towards the younger generation to say that you need to learn as well. But I see the point what you're saying. A lot of it happens on the job, isn't it?
A lot. So if you look at my generation, a lot of our knowledge was learned on the job. And you can't replicate that. You just can't. I mean, there's no way of doing it. But our job now as the older guys is to tell the why we did things, how we did it. Because that's part of, not what keeps me up at night, but is, it's coming to the end of my career. My biggest concern is the next generation coming through. That's part of that training that we were talking about. Is if you look at the industry as a whole, the manufacturers are doing a fantastic job in getting airplanes. I mean, Boeing and Airbus, their 20-year outlook always tells you how many thousands of airplanes are coming, and then the next sentence they tell you how there's not enough pilots to fly them. You and I both remember in our early days of our career, there was 4 and 5 person cockpits.
Yeah.
You look at a 747, 200, 100, L1011s, all of those airplanes had 4 or 5 people in the cockpit. Well, the manufacturers have done a great job getting that down to 2.
They're trying to get it to 1 now.
we know aircraft that are flying, probably in the business side of it, where there's 1 person.
Correct.
You just have to look at the military, and technology flow down is a huge part of military life. Is you look at the type of drones they're flying. I mean, some of those drones are the size of Challenger 604 business jets. They're massive, and they're not have a person in them.
Yeah. It's
and
remotely piloted. Yeah,
and they don't go across, the Atlantic or the Pacific on ships. They fly, and they're flying from people. They're sitting in a remote location, doing exactly what kids are doing right now on their, their flight simulators and stuff like that. So the technology is there. The regulations are not. And until the regulations match up with the technology, you will be able to put 20,000 new airplanes into it. I won't see it. I'll be long off this planet when this happens. My grandkids, maybe my great-grandkids, they will grow up in a different world. I grew up when mathematics and engineering was done on slide rules and log tables and stuff like that. My first computer programming, I had to write a program that did a punch card, then into another machine that gave you a ticker tape, and then that ticker tape gave you an answer. So computer science from when I was a kid has come a long way. You look at the world today; those kids are growing up in a digital world. Digital is their reality.
AI.
So all of that combined tells me that at some point we got autonomous cars. Why not autonomous aircraft? We already have them. The regulations are not there. So if we go from 5 people in 1970 to 1 person today, in 50 years, we've seen a massive change in how airplanes operate, how they're maintained, and that's the part that concerns me. We've sent rockets to the moon with monkeys and dogs. We've never had a monkey or a dog fix the airplane yet. So we've put so much into the pilot side of it. I hope someone somewhere is listening and saying, how do we get people back into our industry that we've lost? People coming in today want to be in aviation, whereas before maybe 10% wanted aviation and the rest we didn't know what they wanted to do, and then came in that way. Now the training schools are going to have to do a lot more. I mean, I've been lucky. Part of my tour here is I was in Hyderabad and just saw one of the new schools that are about to be launched. Yeah. I wish I had that as a kid.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you're right. I saw it. I saw details of that, and I was thinking the same.
I would highly recommend anybody, if they're over here, to go have a look at the training school in GMR. Yeah. Their first class starts in July, I think it is. That's the future of training. Yeah. That is the future of training. They've done a fantastic job. Yeah. And they should be commended for it. Yeah,
you're right. I think it has been done in collaboration with Airbus.
Airbus is a huge part of the support behind that, and helping them with the simulated tools. Yeah. And I'm not talking about the hand tools. I'm talking about when I was being taught avionics, basic, fuel flow, if you lose a pump, what happens? It was all paper. Well, these guys have got whole board set up, and you can actually turn, pump off, pump on, and actually go through the troubleshooting that you would need to do. Generators, actually have a RAT, that's a ram air turbine, that if you go through the process of having each of your generators fail, the deployment of the RAT happens, and you actually see the RAT deploying, and it's like, damn, where was that in 1975, 1980? So they've done a phenomenal job, and they should be commended.
Yeah, I've heard about that. You're right. However, see, there is one thing about this now, new technologies, new demands, and the new generation. I believe, on the other hand, especially what I'm seeing in US and Ireland I'm specifically mentioning because it is I would say the birthplace for aircraft leasing and de facto capital, I am seeing, on the other hand, there is a lot of chatter there in the conference also this year earlier about talent retention challenges. Actually, there is a lot of challenge also happening, right? There is a issue with how to retain good people or how to attract more talent. The competition is now coming for talent, not just from other aviation companies, but like in Ireland specifically, what I have understood is the competition is coming, and frankly, even here in India, it is happening. It is coming from, even OEMs are now competing with airlines and MROs and companies like ours, very frankly, and even with leasing companies. And they're also competing now. There is competition from software companies. The names I've heard is like any of the like Googles and others. Yep. They are competing for the same talent, correct, which people like us are competing for.
Yep.
So in that situation, like, for you, what do you think can be done better by the industry overall?
Wow, that is, that's a great question, Alok. It is also probably one of the hardest ones to answer. I talked about how, younger people coming into the industry is hard enough as it is. you can probably edit this one out, I'm not quite sure. But aviation used to be a sexy job at one time. I mean, people all wanted to be pilots. People, you work in aviation, you're fantastic job. Well, because we've done such a good job in the automation of cockpits, pilots are now becoming more systems administrators, systems operators. They need thousands of hours of training for when things go wrong. But our aircraft are so good now, you can actually tell when a pilot is landing an airplane versus the autopilot. There's a marked difference because they don't do it that often now. So now they have to do one in every X number of landings to keep their hands in. So that type of technology, entry level in is going to be an issue. Retaining the good people, once we've spent time and effort and money training them, it's now becoming hard to keep them. A lot of the people in the aircraft leasing side, so probably about 75% of any aircraft leasing company is not technical. It's your finance guys, it's your lawyers, it's all the people that deal with the Excel side. I call Excel cowboys. They deal with I apologize, everyone, but they deal with the theory behind it, and so those models are vitally important of how we all work. Airlines, MROs, lessors, we all work to financial projections and models. Those guys are the ones that can be stripped away very quickly. The other one that we're starting to see is some of your senior technical guys are now being pulled away because of their business, the processes and the procedures that they work under, into companies that are now looking at, so how are they going to expand? And if they're going to bring in new software, how does that software work in the real life? Those are the guys that have been dragged away from aircraft companies, aircraft leasing companies, to bring their business knowledge.
Yeah.
The difference is about a zero on their salary.
Right.
The IT industry pays considerably well compared to aviation. Aviation, especially on the technical side, has always been some of the lowest paid people in the professional world. Yeah. My personal opinion.
No, it is my opinion as well.
So
in the airlines, in fact, engineering and technical is always known as a necessary evil.
Absolutely. If they didn't need to have us, they wouldn't have us. Yeah. But I always tell people, especially marketing, sales, financing, you don't need me to do your job, but you need me to do your job. I can't do your job. I don't want to do your job. If I wanted to be a finance person, I'd have done that at school. So you need me to do your job. I don't need you to do my job. My job is touching airplanes. My job is making it fix, getting it into service and doing what we need to do. So it's obviously a symbiotic relationship, but we are starting to see that at a more senior level now, people going away. How do we keep them? Can't compete to the salaries.
I think that is the underlying reason mainly.
If you go back to your mechanic days when you were first starting out in an airline, people changed airlines for 50 cents.
Yes.
Because we were so low paid compared to other parts of the company. So people would move for 50 cents an hour, $1, a pound here. Yeah. So we've had that type of mentality. I mean, there's a segment of our group that, mercenaries, not missionaries. And at one time we were all missionaries because we believed in what we were doing. And another company will come along and offer another, 50 cents and we would go. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's the reality that we have to deal with.
Absolutely right. I 100% agree what you're saying. One of the questions you have actually already answered is, I wanted to ask you about the evolution of Carlyle from Apollo, but I think you have given me more than I wanted, or more than I asked rather. I'm more interested in knowing about your role, and to know a little bit more, maybe through a certain set of questions. So one of the things, Rob, you have mentioned is what you see as the CTO's role. You're the bridge in converting the technical knowledge to dollars, which is great. However, I think another area where as a CTO you're responsible is managing your people. And we were just talking about people, right?
Yep.
But there is another angle to it. Carlyle is a global company. You're a multinational company. You may have possibly, I don't know how, maybe all major nationalities now working for Carlyle. In your team, what cross-cultural issues are there, or what you see there, and how do you as a leader manage that? Some learnings would be great.
But I think as a leader, you need to be cognizant. I mean, we live in a global industry. I mean, aviation touches all four corners of the planet. Everything we do, everything we say has an impact. there's a big impact on things that don't get said either. And if you, I mean, I was very lucky again, I'll take a little bit of a segue. I was very lucky again, when we started WestJet Airlines, I worked under some of the best people that had culture as their first and foremost of everything we did. And I always say that every company is going to have a culture, whether you like it or not. Your job as a leader is to nurture the culture you want. That's part of leadership 101, is making sure you have a very good culture. Don Bell, one of the co-founders of WestJet, ran all of our culture, and he always said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So if you keep hiring the same people, you're going to get the same result. If you keep hiring the same people from Harvard, you get what that Harvard professor taught them. If you want to be the best in the industry, you have to have a full multicultural team in there. You would never, again, maybe this is one of those and you edit it out, but you never put an Englishman running a team in France. You never put a Frenchman running a team in England. You'll never put a Korean in Japan to run a Japanese program, just like you would never put an Indian in Pakistan to run a Pakistan program. There's certain cultural sensitivities that you have to be aware of. That doesn't mean you say it's going to impact the job. You still have to get the job done. So by having the right mix of people, whether you're sitting at a desk or you're sitting at an aircraft trying to transition it through a heavy check, you need to have the right people in place. Having the right cultural sensitivities, that may mean hiring a team in situ, and you know that we've done that already, but having someone from another background who thinks differently. I'm very lucky at Carlyle. The Carlyle Group itself, as I say, my office is Miami, or my next largest office, Dublin, and then Singapore. But the Carlyle Group has, offices all over the world and have a very diverse team in those. And you have to have that, because if you don't, you'll always get what that team think without completely understanding. Having a diverse team also allows you to look at it, every financial decision differently, because 3 guys from New York are going to look at it the way they were taught in New York through the New York business world, but someone in Tokyo is going to look at it completely differently. Someone in Mumbai is going to look at it completely differently from someone in Rome. So all of those have to come together to get you the best decision. That best decision at the end of the day allows things to happen smoother, but also have a better financial return for you. Like I say, if you always hire the same people from the same school that was taught by the same professor, you're going to get exactly what they think, and you'll never have a diverse opinion. That diverse opinion is not just me, the CTO. It needs to come from Himanshu, who sits on my finance team, who's from India, and Jessica, who sits in our team, who's from China. So that has to be coming, and part of your job as a CTO is to make sure that happens and is balanced. Because just because I have 10 guys who are all 10 guys who all think as guys think, I also have a team of ladies in there, from my VPs down, directors. They have a say as well, and they have to have their voice heard. And your job as a leader is to make sure their voice is heard, because we have a very bad habit of mansplaining things to people, and that is not right. Especially when you've got people that are degreed engineers who can stand on their own 2 feet and can give their viewpoint. It should be listened to, and it should be acknowledged.
Yeah, as one of the saying goes, otherwise you will all agree to each other, and you possibly will all be wrong.
And you'll all be wrong. Yeah. And you all go off the cliff. You all go off the cliff together.
Yeah. Yes, and that happens.
Oh yes, far too often.
In your role again, another follow-up question for me to know. And given that you have given us the breadth of Carlyle's current business, the 4 funds, and the whole area which is under your management, which are the biggest challenges and opportunities, Rob, you're seeing today for the technical and engineering, particularly asset management related?
Asset management in Carlyle is a little bit different from the other lessors, because when we started, it was all straight to part out. Green time, aircraft going for part out. So the asset management was actually a separate group from technical, because they had so much aircraft parts on consignment that was our asset management. So today it's completely different. So if you look at asset management or fleet management, whatever terminology is used in the leasing world, that comprises technical, accounts payable, contracts management. And while we have that in Carlyle, it was always separate from all the other groups, and asset management was really just dealing with the parts. As we've grown now, and although we still do a lot of aircraft straight to part out and consign those assets, the asset management team now we're already seeing it evolving, and it will evolve, and it'll not become exactly the same as other lessors, but it'll become our version of it, just because we have such a diverse part of the business, that new aircraft to end. So asset management, I think, will morph into what we want it to be, and the people that deal with the part side of it will then become part of maybe trading, because you're trading parts. You're not actually managing the asset. The asset itself is now the aircraft. As aircraft come younger, it takes a completely different skill set and mindset to manage that asset compared to a 22-year-old airplane that's on its last 3 months of a green time lease. So that part of it, we can touch on later if you want, but that asset, that's where my mind is on that. The opportunities coming in now, wow. If you're a good engineer, we need you. We want you in our industry. Part of 2022, when we purchased AMCK, I've always had engineering, but it was a consultant role, because as we were moving aircraft, it may be one more lease, so I needed a new LOPA through a Part 21. So I used an outside leasing company. But when you have an order book, you can't do that outside. You need that inside, and you need good engineers in there, because as you're getting those new aircraft and you're building towards those deliveries, engineering is paramount. It's actually first and foremost in everything we'll do on that new aircraft. So I never had that before. I never had to worry about that before. Well, now I have to worry about that. I never had to worry about purchasing. Well, you got an order book, you got BFE, which is buyer furnished equipment. You have to deal with multiple vendors to get all that equipment, and that will come from the airline that you're going to lease the aircraft to. They will tell you what their configuration is, and that all has to be bought, logistically managed on dock on the right times, so that the manufacturer can then install it on the production line. And all of that configuration is managed by the engineering. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you've got an order book of 20 to 100 airplanes, you may have 400 airlines look at those aircraft and want their configuration. All of that has to be built. It's got to be analyzed. It's got to be priced. And that is the role of the engineering. So engineering in an aircraft leasing company is vital. Someone who's got an interest to come in, who's got some aircraft experience, whether they're coming from an MRO or coming from an airline, or someone in the industry wanting to move to try something different, that's probably the challenge. That's the challenge, is getting people with experience. Because lots of people want to come in the industry, they'll get no experience, and there is a role for that. Don't get me wrong, but when you're a growing company like ours, and people have to come in running. Very hard when they can't spell airplane to get them up to that level.
There is no bandwidth to get them up to speed
just in my unique situation, we're moving so fast that we need people coming in that know what they're doing.
So it sounds like to me that the challenge you're underlining is the evolution of the business from what it used to be to what it is turning into now, with the new order books and doing different things with the same people, and bringing in more people to be able to do that better. Am I right?
Absolutely
kind of paraphrasing it, but
absolutely correct. I tell everybody that comes in today is your job is to help us get to the new us. Don't worry about the old us. The old us are still here. We'll tell you why we did things, tell you why the systems we had in place. Your job is to help us to get to that new place. Because as we get younger aircraft, that comes with completely different challenges. Doing the final lease of an airplane that's 19 years old, it's got maybe a 2-year, 3-year lease. What you put into that airplane to get it through to the end of its life is nothing like a 6-year-old Boeing 787. I mean, that you're into the $20-40 million transition cost compared to 250 to 300,000. That's a massive change. That means people that know what they're doing, dealing with the manufacturers, budget control. I mean, it's vitally important. And that really, if you want to go again into another segue, part of that coming into the industry and wanting to do is continuous learning. If you want to come into our industry, have an understanding of finance. when I became the director of tech services at WestJet, the first thing I did is I signed up to the University of Calgary and did a financial for non-financial managers and accounting for non-financial accounting, non-accountants. The first thing I had to learn was the finance side of it, because I'm now in charge of the biggest spend outside of heavy maintenance and line maintenance. I better understand P&L, I better understand basic P&L, I better understand, how that works and how you manage it and how you record it, because I have to stand in front of the CFO at least once a month and justify the spend. And not only that, the value of the inventory. Why have you got so much inventory? What is your balance between, your cost per tail, your inventory per tail? If it's too high, you can bankrupt the company. You can put the company into a serious spin because they've got so much assets, but you get no operating capital. So all of that is vitally important. So coming in, go continuously train, go do something that's out of your comfort zone. Just go learn something. That might be the advantage over everyone else that's trying to come in. Is, oh, by the way, I did an accounting program. I wanted to understand this. No disrespect to mechanics on the airlines, they're looking for parts. I want parts here and I need them now. It's the people behind the scenes that are looking at the money side of it and saying, I can't give you that because that will be too expensive or would seriously impact us. So where do we need? Not every line station needs, wheels and tires and brakes. They don't. But you need them somewhere where you've maybe got enough crossover people flights. And what is the cheapest thing that has the biggest impact to your delays and cancellations? That might be a $10 widget, and it may not need to be in your main base. It may have to be in that line station that sees one flight a day. Because if that airplane goes unserviceable at a remote location for a $10 piece, that is a serious impact. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars of delays, cancellations, reaccommodations. So you have to balance all that. And that's why the finance part of understanding what we do is important.
Yeah, this reminds me of my days when I was running the maintenance control, and we used to have a concept of hot zones and cold zones.
Right.
And we had to optimize our resources to make sure that we are serving the hot zones while reducing the resource ability in the cold zones to optimize cost efficiencies, obviously. And that pretty much sounds very similar to what you're saying.
Very similar. Very similar.
Yeah. On the fact of moving fast, one I think fact we can share, and obviously it is public knowledge, but the question that leads to is, let me first underline what I'm trying to say, is that you guys purchased Fly portfolio, and right after that AMCK, right? Very close to that.
Yeah, and
I'm sure that must have come with some very interesting set of technical challenges for you and your team. Would you care to give us some flavor of what you were facing that time and how you overcame that?
Some sleepless nights. Yeah. I'll start off by saying that the Fly portfolio was a portfolio of aircraft that was managed by BBAM, and when we acquired it, we took that over. That had challenges in the fact that they had multiple different, so to take the aircraft aside, we'll start off with, I think, something the people in India will understand better than the number of aircraft is the amount of data that we get. So you when you buy a fleet of aircraft, especially used aircraft, it comes with paper documents, it comes with digital documents in multitude of formats. And we had just signed our contract with GE Digital ATS. And so we had just started to convert our own fleet of 220 airplanes at that time into the digital format to get them into ATS when we acquired Fly. So Fly gave an added layer of complexity in that we now had to take what BBAM had and then convert it into a format that we can then move into ATS, at the same time re-indexing and redoing all of the files to come into our standards so that we can then move it in. Because it's no use having someone else's file name and you'll never find it in the system. So we had to redo all of those files. Just as we were getting finished to that, along comes the acquisition of AMCK.
Yeah.
So the BBAM transfer over to us on Fly was about 10 terabytes of unstructured data. Then comes the AMCK acquisition, and that was an additional 5 terabytes of data. And although there was double the aircraft, the AMCK portfolio was younger. So that had a massive impact in not having a massive impact at the time. So it allowed us to then take that and then restructure that data into our format so we can then move it into ATS. So in about an 18-month period, we acquired over 200 airplanes and transferred 30 million files and 15 terabytes of data, restructured it. We had multiple companies going at the same time behind the scenes to get that done. And my hat goes off to those guys, because I'd be sitting in the corner sucking my thumb right now if I had to try and do all that. So I was very, very lucky. Managed and ran by Donald McGowan from my technical management team, who is an absolute genius when it comes to stuff like that. And you know Donald very well. And
he's great.
And one of the reasons is you can't have him.
He's great, and he's a subscriber to our podcast.
Yes.
Thanks, Donald.
So he's almost single-handedly, along with another young guy in our team, Jerry Reyes, managed all of that digital transfer. At the same time, we had to absorb 200 plus airplanes over two portfolios into the team, and we had aircraft that were, in storage, aircraft that were in transition, aircraft that were, had to be repossessed, aircraft that were in the final stages of the transition delivery. All of that then had to be handed over. And my hat goes off to the two CTOs at both companies, probably the most professional handover of anything I've ever done in my life. So Tom Bean was from the MCK side, absolutely amazing in supporting us on that. And, all of us worked together to get that done. There's no hard feelings about a company going under. There was no hard feelings about losing a portfolio. At the end of the day, it swings and roundabouts in our industry. The people who you're working against are now the people you're working with, and it's just we're professionals, and we do what we need to do to get the job done. So all of that, and so overnight, I went from 200 airplanes to 410 at one point, and we've now settled down a little bit to about 385. All of that, all of those transitions, all of that transactions, all of that data was all done in about an 18-month period. And there was a lot of sleepless nights across all the teams. And but at the same time, absolute professionalism with everybody we talked to. That change for me then prompted me that I had to bring in, people with completely different mindsets. Bring in engineers, bring in people that have procurement backgrounds. So Enda Dunn became my first ever VP of engineering. He deals with all of the new aircraft. Robin Wells came in, my first procurement professional. I think Robin's today's the last day. She's going off to do other things, but so for a good 14-month period there, I had Robin help with all of the procurement processes. All half of the airplanes have now been placed, and all of that BFE was single-handedly done by her. And again, an amazing person. It allowed me to build a Dublin team. It allowed me to build a Singapore team. I now have an Asia team, two very good engineers in the team, and the third one coming soon. And I think that will give me a good baseline of hands-on technical transition management people to get us through for the next few years. We added technical management, which in our system, although does the exact same as other lessors. What I do is I take away the things like maintenance reserve analysis away from the people touching airplanes, and allow people that've got BAs, BBAs, MBAs to do that, because it's such a unique part of the job that if you don't do it properly, you leave a lot of money on the table. Right. And that has to be properly managed. So I have that team doing that. And I now have a full power plant team that I never had before. I've got Les Harkness as my SVP, and he's got 3 people in his team. And then all of that, there's about maybe 23 people for almost 400 airplanes. But I have about 170 to 270 consultants out in the field that help support all of that activity.
That's awesome. That's great. Actually, a very good explanation of the question I was asking. It brings me to my second favorite topic. The first one is obviously aviation, but the second one is data and software. Because you mentioned challenges, you mentioned 10 terabytes, 5 terabyte, 13 terabyte, which, just so that our audience understands, a lot of data is actually discarded also after review. So I'm assuming 13 terabytes is what came up. Apollo, then, before it became Carlyle. And this is something, I heard because in 2011, I started dabbling into software. And when I started scouting the market for opportunities, I heard that time that Apollo was the one company, possibly at that time the only leasing company I heard, who had very successfully developed an in-house software platform, which you have mentioned you have moved on to new tools. But if I may just add, I'm aware that you're still using your legacy software to a certain
absolutely.
extent.
It's still an integral part of what we
Yeah.
do.
So it's great, but I would like to know, maybe give us a little insight into the thought process. Why did Apollo do that? You were ahead of the curve, and how the evolution of that has played out.
So I'll go back to 2007 when I joined Apollo. I had come from an airline, WestJet, who were probably one of the, I don't want to say a pioneer, because every airline has a CMTS, a computer maintenance tracking system of some kind, whether it's Trax or AMOS and stuff like that. We all have some kind of way of tracking the fleet, because the aircraft itself, if you think about it, there's how many thousands of parts on an aircraft, and all of them at some point are going to be repaired or overhauled or replaced. So you have to track that from a pure regulatory standpoint. So I came into this side of it with that in my mind. One of the first jobs I had when I came into Apollo was we had two A310s that were coming back from Air Transat, from TAP Portugal, and they were going off to Air Transat. I had two A320s that were coming back from Air France that were going to go straight to Parnout. We had a big program going on in Brazil at the end of Varig, so we had 10 airplanes from the Varig fleet, and in each one of them there was up to 10 consultants on the job. Now, if you think before 2000, when an aircraft transitioned, the aircraft being returned from the lessee would have the owner, lessor, show up with a team of people to do an audit. Then the aircraft would sit on the ground while the next airline would come in and do their audit. So an aircraft could be sitting on the ground for 30 to 90 days, not making much money with that airplane sitting on the ground. So the first thing I did is I started to institute an FTP and say to people, you don't need 10 on the ground, you need 2. The ones that are doing this, sitting there in the office with you doing the audit, they can do that through an FTP side using PDF and build the files digitally. From that, we then moved on to Stream on the asset management, or the records side of it.
Parts management.
Yeah. And then Fly Docs, and now finally ATS. So what that did for me is when we started doing the FTP, the cost structure changed considerably. Still paying the same daily rate to the consultants, but your cost side of it went down. We started to do things like that on the digital side that were never done before. At the same time, I had a very one-sided conversation one time with my president, who was not happy that part sales were not happening, and the consignee at the time said that the records were not good, they couldn't sell them, only to find out that it was really they were missing one piece of paper, which is a non-incident statement. So they quarantined all these parts. So I sat with this pre-Donal. He would have done it completely different from me, but I sat and I had a whiteboard and I drew a fishbone diagram, just basic process, and say, okay, what happens? When does a part sell? And when do we get the notice? And then work backwards to all of the things that had to go along the way. Start the teardown. When does a teardown finish? When does the cleaning finish on the parts? When do they get put on the shelf to sell? When did the sale happen? And then when does the reconciliation? That could be a 180-day period. So from that fishbone diagram started myself, Jerry Reyes, another gentleman who's no longer with us, Peter Blakeney, to start building an access database just to see what we had and how we could track it. We had a very good Excel tracker for parts already on consignment, but not the sales side, and not when the actual triggers should happen. So I was looking for triggers. I was looking for a system to give me an email that said, you should see the first sale, and then start following up and go, okay, why is there no sales? You should see the disassemblies happen. Has it finally disassembled? So that was what the genesis behind it. And then it started to morph into, that's a better way of tracking all of the assets, not just the ones on consignment, but what are the ones that were on the airplane? We have an airplane coming back in 60 days for teardown. Shouldn't we be looking at that? So that really was the start of our ERP system. It was called AIMS, which was Apollo Enterprise Management System. And in the early days when we would sit in front of investors, they would actually say to us, Why isn't anyone else doing this? Because the aircraft leasing world, pre-2007 to 2010, everything is done by Excel, Word, maybe Box.com, Outlook was a lot. Everybody had their version of how to track their assets, but they didn't track it to the detail we were. So our AIM system now, every part in every airplane all over the world, you can pull up any registration, cross-reference to the MSN, to whatever. We have all that in there. And around about 2018, I was well down the path of creating the first CRM. I was working with GE Digital. I actually sat on for quite a while, sat on the GE Digital steering committee in their advisory group. And from that, I was working with another great GE gentleman, Gib Bosworth, who's now no longer in the industry. But that was really the genesis of starting a CRM. We don't have any CRM that specific to aircraft leasing, and you can Salesforce and all those guys do a great job, but their CRM is for selling widgets. I know my revenue stream, supposedly. I know my revenue stream. So I'm not looking at the sales side of anything, but it came with a whole bunch of analysis. And so I was working with GE Digital. We had a company called Hypergiant, which is a software accelerator out of Austin. And we were well down the way. We'd done wireframes. We'd done, all the business processes when Carlyle acquired us. So that program gets shelved until all the purchasing, settled. And by the time all that is settled and we thought about, going forward again, the entire digital industry had caught up and surpassed us. So software as a service is really where it is right now. And all of those guys, LeaseWorks, they've done phenomenal work in the time that we were sitting doing what we were doing. They were doing it. I had an engineer and a guy that understood access. That's how we started. And these guys have got, the best computer scientists in the world helping them. So they caught up to us and then they went past us. So now I don't need to do it. And the industry has there, and we're going to use that. And we're actually very close to launching LeaseWorks in our domain, and Sun System Core Finance is going to be there as well. Awesome. And then CRM will get overlaid on top of that eventually. So we have come along. The industry caught up to me and a couple of guys that didn't know what we were doing, and we're now, thank you very much for passing us. We're now going to use you.
Natural question to that is, that means what you see is there is a shift in how possibly asset management was done then versus it is done now, and technical asset management specifically for you as an area of focus, maybe. Rob,
it's definitely an area of focus, and I don't want to give too much away because I'm still working with some of my colleagues inside Carlyle. But yeah, it's definitely it's a massive shift. How you manage a 22-year-old aircraft that's going to part out is completely different from an aircraft that just come off the production line.
Would you give me an example, maybe just a little bit high-level flavor of how that is different?
Okay, so our job in the technical side is keeping the value of the asset as high as possible to allow the maximum use of it, no matter where it goes in the world. An aircraft that's going to go straight to part out, when you're dealing with the return conditions, there's a lot of things that we do that to maximize the value of the parts versus the maximize the value of the whole asset is different. I will buy out of repairs to the fuselage. Why do I need all that repair data? It's getting crushed. However, the repair on that nose cowl, I need that repair data. So we manage that asset a little bit differently. When it's a brand new aircraft, all that data has to be managed because it all has to be transferred. Now, what happens to that data after it leaves us as the first owner and it gets to the end of life 20 years later? There's leakage, there's losses, all those things that go along with it. But that allows the person at the end to do something different than I can do at the beginning. At the beginning, I need it all because I don't know where the next life is going to be. Whether that's another lease in India or another lease in America or a lease in South America. I don't know that because that doesn't happen until closer to the end of the lease itself. So how we manage it went from a couple of ex-mechanics to now looking at asset management of being an integral part of the technical business contracts management and accounting side. So accounts receivable, accounts payable. Really, part of that should be in asset management, because the maintenance reserve reconciliation happens between the maintenance reserve technical side and the payment side. But the contracts management has to be part of that as well, because there's a contractual part of that has to be done. As an airline, if you're not giving me all the data to help reconcile that maintenance reserve claim, I can't really let the money go until I have that, because my investors are going to want to see that. Because if you have a 6Y claim that's $1.5 million and 1.75, I can't just carte blanche sign a check and say, here you go. I have to look at the contract. What does the contract say? Because I haven't looked at that contract for 6 years, but neither has the airline. So we have to reconcile that together. And, and not defending the airlines, what they normally do is when the check finishes, all of that information gets rolled up, and then someone accounting, that's a leased airplane, and they fire an invoice. And here's our claim, and you go, well, no, that's not contractual. And then what you do is you start stripping back from contractual side. So that asset management I shouldn't say never existed. It was in a different form in 2007, 2008 than it is today. So there's a lot more oversight, because the value of the asset is so much higher than it is at the end of its life. And again, at the end of its life, the asset management is really taking it to the ground and then recycling the parts back into the supply chain, and then ethically disposing of what's left. I don't know if that answered it, but that's
I think
that's my version.
It explained it very well, the difference between how then older asset, midlife assets, or possibly older than that, and then new. And it also ties in very nicely with how the business of Carlyle's business is evolving. Yeah. Thank you very much for explaining that. And you have already spoken about the digital piece also, but on the industry trends overall now, while we're talking digital, we're also having new technology coming directly into the front end of aviation.
Mm-hmm.
Topic, I'm going to say it, beaten to death, is problems with GTF. I think at this stage, I can say it is beaten to death, though we have not seen the end of it.
No.
Still going on, right? So there is still it's a situation which is ever evolving. Frankly, I'm expecting some news every month now. Every month something or other is coming up. The impact of that. I think so. On that one, Rob, the industry trends now, new technology, and maybe on carry forward, I have another question, but maybe first we start with that.
Yeah. So there's definitely the new technology impacts. So we'll probably split it up and do aircraft or engines, then aircraft, because the two of them have very unique implications in our industry. So engines, obviously Pratt & Whitney is the focus right now of the issues in their geared turbofan engines, and that is a serious impact to the industry. But people forget we had that as well back in 1970, 1980, when you had the new aircraft coming in, the new generation, the CFM, Dash 7, we had issues. The Dash 5 had issues. So every generation has some form of entry into service concerns. The big difference today, I think, is you're looking at engines that are now being designed on computers. I'll say that as the old guy on computers. There's a lot of digital design that goes on, that we've shortened the D&T, the demonstration and trial side of it, from a new airplane that would take 7 to 10 years from paper to production. It's now 4 years. We do a lot of computer modeling on, the vibration analysis and stuff like that. That really didn't happen before. You had test runs, test cells, and you ran the bejesus out of them until they fell apart, and then you started to design from there, or redesign. So I think there's part of that, but I also think, not defending Pratt & Whitney, but are we finally at the end of that generation of design? You look at the gas turbine engine. It's been around since the late 40s, into production as commercial in probably the 50s. The design has not changed. The material has changed. The alloys have changed, but the design itself hasn't really changed that much. So what's next? If we've got to the end of this technology, it's going to take a whole bunch of young people being born today. They're going to come up with a whole new design. Is it an electric engine? Is it a scram engine? Is it ramjets? Is it something else? Is it electric? Is it hydrogen? I'm going to be gone.
Yeah, so what you're trying to say is definitely a brave thing which Pratt did in taking initiative and designing a new design.
It's definitely a new design, and that will have its entry into service issues. How they deal with that is what's going to be the make or break. It's had a serious impact. We're definitely, although our order book is almost all CFMs at the moment, or LEAP engines at the moment, we've got, I'll give you an example in our Asia region. We were supposed to have about 18 transitions this year, coming out of Asia operators into other ones. We're down to 2. And the 2 that are coming back are actually 6-year-old GTF powered aircraft here in India. So there's definitely an impact, because what's happening is aircraft that should have come to the end of their life naturally are being extended. Now, normally when you would have an end of life asset extending, it may extend for 1 or 2 years. We're seeing 4 to 6 years, and is 100% to give support to their order book with Pratt & Whitney powered engines, because they're already planning AOG, like aircraft on the ground, for engine issues when they're not even delivered yet. So that has an impact. Now, as a lessor of older aircraft, that's extra revenue. Thank you very much, but it doesn't help the industry. The parts industry is now being seriously impacted because the airplanes are not being torn down.
Yeah.
They're being extended, so that's driving the price up of aircraft parts. If you can find any good engines on the open market right now, buy them, because they're not happening either, because the natural teardown of engines is not happening, or that recycling of one good engine from an aircraft that's going to the end of its life isn't happening. So it's impacting the supply chain of everything else. Never mind the supply chain issues we have from the new aircraft and the new aircraft order books, and those issues being impacted by global events. It's happening to the mid to end of life aircraft too, that they can get access to parts, engines to support the continued operation. So it's
They're
great.
also getting grounded because of that.
Yeah.
One of the big engine lessors we work with, close to 400-500 engines, they told me recently that they have no engines sitting idle, nothing. Everything is on lease.
Everything
is earning them revenue. May not be flying on an aircraft, but everything is earning them revenue.
But here's the adverse effect to an airline. What's your spares level?
Yeah.
If you don't have any spares, you're going to ground your airplane when you have an issue.
Yeah.
So if you have a bird strike, or you have some failure of something, and you've got no spares, that airplane's grounded.
Yeah. So
that's impacting the traveling public.
Yeah, so some of the bigger airlines are leasing engines to keep them on the stand as spares.
They're taking, like I said, if you find a good engine on the market today, grab it.
Yeah.
If you find an engine stand,
take it.
Because there's an impact to that also. There's not enough stands to put the unserviceable engines into. So there's airplanes, personally no airplanes are sitting there that are grounded, and the engines are just we call it 3-pointed. They're just hung up on the engine mounts because there's no stands. So you can't even deploy the aircraft if you wanted to.
That's an investment tip right there.
I'm not going to say that. So there is an impact on the new technology coming in. We have not the same thing coming on the aircraft side. My concern on the new technology coming in on the aircraft side is the lack of people with that knowledge. So if you look at me, I started with Boeing 737-200s, helicopters, all the way through the classic range, and then I came into this side of it, and I've learned, this side of the industry. But if you look at 787s, A350s, you look at that new technology coming in, those airplanes are going to have a transition sometime between 6 and 12 years of age. Who's going to do it on my side? I have no idea. I can barely spell 787, never mind tell you how it actually digitally moves, because it's a digital aircraft. It's a composite aircraft. Yeah. So how do we do that? So if you look at the consultant industry, a lot of the consultants are quite I will call it in the twilight of their careers.
Yeah.
There's a big gap between my generation, the generation below me, and the ones that are coming in. A big generational gap. The guys that are coming in young are still in their 30s. The guys that, and I'm, here's my late 50s coming into my 60s, and the group below me is maybe in their 40s. Who is learning the 787, the A350? It's airlines. Well, those airline guys are still going to be there when they go through their first transitions.
Yeah.
How do we, as the leasing world, tap into that knowledge base to help us make sure those transitions happen properly? I don't know who's going to do that.
Yeah, and the additional challenge, Rob, today in the market is for specifically that market which you have referred to, the front-facing field
Hmm.
reps. As you have just given a very interesting statistic, 18 transitions, two are happening this year for
Yep.
you. There are some lessors who have zero transitions happening over next 2 years. That is actually forcing a lot of the front-facing consultants out of
Out of
business.
business.
And I know many of them personally who have gone belly up,
Yep.
businesses have closed, or they have just retired, decided to retire
Yep.
because of the reason you just
Yep.
mentioned. So I think it is one thing, if I may just say, that overall as a leasing industry where they depend on these consultant pool, it will be maybe imperative that they keep them busy in some way, for next 2 years.
I've been very lucky. I've always said when the thing about the consultant industry, you go through a lot of trial and error till you find the people that really. And I'm not saying that there's bad consultants out there. What I'm saying is every company has a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
So when you finally find consultants that understand your thought process and your methodology and they buy into it, those guys I've kept busy. I've told them, says, if there's never any work, I'm actually going to fly you to Miami and make you paint lampposts so I don't lose you. Because once those good consultants are gone, they're gone forever.
Yeah.
They're gone forever. And that's the unfortunate part of what we're going through with the younger guys who have not built up that 10, 20, 30 years of knowledge in the consulting world. They're the unfortunate victims of this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I will keep all my senior guys busy, and I have to, because I know once they're gone, they're gone. Then I have to start training all over again. And training, there is a cost to training. Everybody thinks it's easy. It's not. There's a cost to training.
Cost to replace can be even 3 times.
It can be
sometimes.
Yeah. Getting them in the first time is the easy part.
Yeah.
Trying to bring them back again is harder.
Yes, I agree. We're talking about how the industry is changing in one specific area due to the pandemic. But what do you see is the aircraft leasing industry? How do you think the behavior of aircraft leasing industry is changing now post pandemic? And how do you see general growth expectations from where you are? How do you see the market evolving?
The change from us is going to be instead of focusing on mid to end of life, we'll be looking at more of the younger aircraft. So that means aircraft that are more expensive, so I can deploy capital faster. Because if I had to put a $500 million portfolio together of mid to end of life, my God, I'd probably another 150 airplanes plus. Whereas if I'm looking out in the younger fleet, that maybe only be 20, 30 airplanes. So the same process goes into it, but the workload lessens with the newer aircraft, the younger fleet. So that allows us to deploy. So we may still stay around about the same number of airplanes, give or take, but what will happen is our AUM, our assets under management, will go up significantly. And that's the ultimate goal of what you're trying to do is do that. Not sure if that answers the question.
I think it answers in terms of Carlyle very well. Absolutely. I'm just wondering that, and you have actually answered one part of my question quite clearly. But how do you see overall the evolution of the industry?
Of the industry, yeah.
Yeah, like we just discussed upon on technical side, the changes in the industry behavior, or rather demands of the market where GTF has caused extensions and one part of the business is affected. I know it's only a very small technical part we're talking about, but beyond that, overall aircraft leasing, like where you sit now, where you and I were sitting in a pub in Dublin just 2 months back, and possibly imagine us sitting,
I have to
and if you were sitting in the same pub 4 years back before the pandemic, when nobody knew pandemic is happening, and today, how is the conversation different is what I mean, really.
I think as a leasing industry, I think we have still got some consolidation to go. And that is going to be the thing that will drive, not necessarily change. It's, at the end of the day, it's still aircraft, it's still an asset. But that will change. I mean, I've gone through it twice. One was a portfolio acquisition, but the other one was a company. And I think we're not finished with that yet. We're not finished with that. The type of capital is going to impact how our industry changes. You only have to go back 5 or 6 years when there was a massive influx of capital from certain parts of the world that really depressed lease rate factors. I remember when I was at WestJet, we were paying, we were the most successful startup airline in Canadian history, and we had lease rate factors of 1.1 and above because we're a startup airline. And you look at startups today, they're getting lease rate factors of 0.5, 0.55. Now, what caused that? Obviously, massive amount of capital come into the market, but manufacturers were delivering airplanes. Look at the production schedules back then compared to today. Now, I know it's a post-COVID, and they haven't come back up yet. And yes, we had the MAX issues, and yes, we had the LEAP issues, and we have the GTF issues, but they're still almost half of what they were deploying pre-COVID. So those airplanes had to go somewhere, and so even Boeing and Airbus were placing airplanes and competing with the lessors. So I think that will rationalize naturally as we get into a more stable environment. But what it's going to do to us, I don't know. I'll tell you in 5 years. What I said in the pub 2 years ago just doesn't count anymore.
Fair enough. And India.
Yeah.
You're in India. I think since the beginning of this week, you just mentioned in the very beginning.
Yeah, I've been in India all week here visiting customers. And
give us your thoughts on India. What do you feel is happening here, and how do you see it playing out?
Well, I'm going to start off by echoing Aidan and all the guys when you ask that question. It is a vitally important marketplace. I mean, it's vitally important. You've got the largest population in the world. I think you're building airports faster than any other time in India's history. You've got massive infrastructure going all across, not just airports, but roadways and trainways out to the airports. You're investing a lot of money in India. So India is a vitally important part of any industry, not just aviation, but for us specifically, it's vitally important. We have to be part of it. You look at the leasing world, I think we're 52% of all the aircraft and commercial airplanes in the world are leased. And the only way you're going to do that growth in India, like any other country, is you have to balance purchase against lease, against financing and stuff like that. So we obviously want to be part of that. That's what we do. We help move people. Probably two specific issues that you're smiling at me across the camera. One of them is obviously Spicejet, and Spicejet is an important part of our portfolio. And yes, we have. I know your customers or your listeners are going to want to know about that. There's not much I can say except Spicejet is a vital part of what we do. We happen to be an asset owner there because during COVID. And the segue to that part is a lot of people may not know that if you look at the Americas and Europe, during COVID, governments gave a lot of money to airlines to keep them alive.
Yeah.
That didn't happen in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Well, how are airlines alive today? Well, the lessor community stepped in. We help restructure leases. We help, defer payments to keep airlines alive because there was no government intervention. And even the countries that did have government intervention, we still went through a lot of restructuring and supporting those airlines to keep them alive. But all the whole, it was the lessor community that stepped in to keep airlines going. Part of that restructuring has led into us becoming an equity owner of Spicejet. So vitally important to us. Go Air, on the other hand, is a little bit different. I'm not going to talk about Indigo because they're running quite fine. We've got Akasa, we've got airplanes with Air India Express, but Go is a major. I got to be careful how I say this because my technical and obviously the lawyers are probably squirming when they're listening to this. But so for me, technically, the biggest concern I have is when they entered into bankruptcy, there was administrator appointed to it, and that administrator allowed the airline to finally allow all the employees to leave. There was somewhere between May and December, nothing was happening to those aircraft. That is a direct impact to me technically.
Yeah.
I have to take these airplanes, and all bankruptcy recoveries, it's technical that have to recover these airplanes and put them into service again. While the leasing marketing teams, commercial teams, legal teams are working on the next customer and how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that. There's only one group in that entire ecosystem touches the airplanes, and that's technical. So as a technical person, that is a major concern. As someone that's worked for an airline, and understanding that 52% of the world's fleet is leased, if we're not allowed to recover our assets in a timely manner, then the leasing world will stop coming here. That is going to have an impact to the traveling public, because if the airplanes that are in here are now half of what they should be, and again, just statistically 50%, the only thing that's going to happen is the prices of tickets are going to go up.
Yeah.
So technically would implore the traveling public to have your say. You have a big impact on this.
Yeah.
Now, India on the government side has done great things in the last little bit, but I know what they've done is a change to the bankruptcy laws and not necessarily the adoption of the Cape Town Convention, which is, from a lessor standpoint, is vitally important to us because it allows us to have the first rights to deal with the aircraft. Here we are in a situation where the change to the law wasn't retrospective. You have an administrator that has only now just started to say, okay, well, maybe we'll let the aircraft be maintained, and it's through people that were part of the...
That is also now a matter which is sub judice, because the court is of the opinion that I don't want to go into it, but yes.
Exactly. The lawyers are squirming right now. So that's my concern. Is I would implore the people to have your say on this, because you do. You, the traveling public, have a massive say in this, and if you don't, there's only one impact if we stop coming in. So I would implore the people to get the Cape Town Convention ratified. Helps everybody and stabilizes.
The Cape Town Convention Act is long pending for adoption by the Indian legislation through our parliament, and I think it will be done. Hopefully, it will be done soon now. That's what we are hoping for. And you're right, the ring fencing they have done, where they've created an exception for the IBC Act, has not been done retrospectively.
No, it wasn't.
So, though it has been done, it is not benefiting the Gopher situation.
Correct.
So far. I have last two questions, which I always like to ask. We have spoken about challengings with people, bringing in people, workforce, etc., etc., etc. But someone who's listening to it, a lot of people are students, a lot of people audience are getting into this industry. In fact, when I was in ISTAT in Austin just a few weeks back, I met a lot of students there who are very interested in this. And you mentioned that people want to come in the industry even who are not from aviation. So aircraft leasing financing as a career option, especially for the next generation coming through, focusing on the regions which are particularly important to the industry. What would be your advice? Someone who's getting in, or what is the right way for them to gain knowledge and maybe establish themselves as a professional to begin with in the industry?
So I'll go a little bit roundabout story, and it's not quite a segue, but hopefully you'll understand what I'm going to say afterwards. So when I was working for the airlines, you look at aircraft maintenance, technical. There is only so many career paths that you have. You come in as a mechanic. You could change and go into quality control, which is aircraft inspector. You could go to the paperwork side, quality assurance. You can carry on being a mechanic for the rest of your life, or you move into management, or maybe safety management systems, or something like that. Each of those has their challenge, and each of those is a growth opportunity. And only you will be able to understand your career path. The days of having a manager tell you what you're going to do and what training you're going to have, it's over. It's long gone. You drive your own career. So you have to understand what you want to do when you grow up, and I'll let you know when that finally happens to me. But you have to look at the different career paths and what you need to do to each one of them. So taking that methodology or that thought process, when I was working for the airlines, and you saw there are people that were happy to be mechanics, and I knew guys that were 60 years old, happily crawling around the bellies of airplanes, and they were the happiest people on the planet. But that's not for everyone. Some people, you look at what you want to do, where you want to grow, where do you want to go, how am I going to get there? Mentorship is a huge part of that, but so is training. And as much as you may have your aircraft license, if you want to come into this side of it, that is one avenue, and it's probably a little bit harder to get in there if you just have an aircraft license. If you went and got yourself a BA, BBA degree, even if it's nighttime, weekends, part-time, that will give you a business step up. As I said earlier, we're people that are coming in, they've got that continuous training. That is one way of doing it as well. If you look at the bigger picture, I think the best that I've seen on the collaboration between industry, academics, and government action is Ireland. I mean, that I think, to me, that is the poster child of how industries work together to create an industry, and that's why it's so centric around Dublin. It's not just the fact that it started there through Guinness Peat back in the late 60s, early 70s. The Irish government worked with academia and worked with the industry to create the centre of excellence for that. Yeah. And kudos to all my CTOs in Dublin that had that environment to grow up in, because that is absolutely phenomenal. And I think it is a poster child for the rest of the industry. If you don't have that, and you're coming from a part of the world, because I'm a Scottish guy, we didn't have that in Scotland. I was lucky enough that I had that. So again, if you look at my career, aircraft mechanic into engineering, manufacturing, MRO experience, VIP. I think that's what finally helped me get in the door. But it was a longer roundabout way than maybe some of my colleagues in the Dublin office.
What I've done is I've taken note of some of the key years you mentioned in your career: 81, 88, 90s, 2007. And if I'm not wrong, each of these sound like you were kind of starting in a new role.
Yep, absolutely.
Or a new role
absolutely.
From the last role, right?
Yep.
What is one thing, if I may just ask you my very final question, what is the things or one thing that you wish you had been told when you were starting out?
Oh, I can't tell you that. You'd have to delete this entire podcast. Oh, you're talking about aviation. Don't be so focused on one thing. Open your eyes to opportunity. Open your ears. God gave you 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen more than you talk. Give yourself more approval than what you do.
What do you mean, give more approval?
We always second guess. Like, we have a bad habit, I think, as humans, as when one door closes, we so look back on that door longingly and go,
keep on regretting.
Oh my God, I should have, I would have, I could have. No, turn around. You're not going that way anymore. Turn around and see what doors open. Because if you always look, I always say, if you always look in the rear view mirror, you'll never see where you're going. So that door is closed. I'm not saying you forget and what you learned, forget the people. That door is closed. Stop looking that way. Turn around. You're only going one way from this point on. That's forward. Now, sometimes it may be a segue to the left or a bit to the right, but you're not going there anymore. That door's closed. Forget it. Move on. And I think we have a bad habit of always looking backwards and saying, oh, would have, should have, could have. No, you would have, should have, could have is that way. It's not there. Stop looking there. Keep going forward. As you do that, listen to people around you. Be observant. Be very observant, and find a mentor. Mentors, we don't give enough importance to mentorship in our industry, but I think if you ask anybody that is a C-level, especially in the technical side, someone somewhere gave you an opportunity.
You're right.
Someone somewhere saw something in you that you don't see in yourself. Grab that. Don't let it go.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely spot on. And I think I 100% agree, having seen what I have seen so far. Yes. Well, that is me, Rob. Anything else you want to add from your side?
No,
any final message?
No, for me, it's just been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. I mean, as nervous as I'll get up coming in, not quite sure what to do, but this is fantastic. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alok, for the invitation.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That was brilliant. Thank you.